Finally, tonight, a conversation with one of the winners of this year's Nobel Prize for Economics. The prizes were handed out yesterday in Stockholm. Yale University professor Robert Shiller was one of 3 Americans honored for research on how financial markets work and how assets like stocks are priced. Our economics correspondent Paul Salman recently spoke with Professor Shiller about the award. It's part of Paul's ongoing reporting, making sense of financial news.
I know you don't like to make predictions and think they're foolish in some sense, but I'm not doing my job if I don't ask the Shiller of Case Shiller, what about the housing market at the moment?
It's a very interesting phenomenon to me that there are bubbles in so many different countries around the world. Like Brazil, I was just down there a few months ago, and they're going through a huge boom in housing. And it seems to be, well, they don't have any data. They weren't even paying attention. They didn't have home price indices until just a few years ago. Now everyone's talking about it and they're excited about it.
Even though in the world, in Ireland, in Spain, in the United States, there were these spectacular bursts of housing bubbles.
Right. You'd think that the Brazilians would learn that the Americans had this huge bubble and then it burst. But that doesn't seem like what they learned. They somehow have adopted kind of the mentality that we had 8 years ago. It's uncanny. When I was in Brazil and talking to people, I felt like I was in the United States of 2005.
Well, did you start to warn them the way you warned us then?
Well, I did, although the Brazilian home price boom is interpreted by most Brazilians as a sign of the country emerging. Brazil is joining the advanced countries of the world. And of course, if you want to buy a condo in Sao Paulo, you have to expect to pay New York prices. That's where it's going, right? And if I say no, then it just feels bad to say that. And I can do it because I'm leaving Brazil in a couple of hours, so I'm out of here.
But I mean, you're a Nobel laureate who won the prize based in large measure on your skepticism about irrational markets, right? I mean, so you would think the Brazilians would go, oh my goodness, Bob Shiller is calling a housing bubble?
Some of them did, but I'm sure it stays as a fringe opinion. It's just the forces the patriotic forces, it just doesn't feel good, this alternative view. And by the way, we have professional economists who could defend any viewpoint with statistics, and they do that.
Everywhere in the world.
Everywhere in the world. Economics is not an exact science. I wanted to be a scientist when I was a child, and I'm lamenting ever since that I go into a field where I just can't be exact, and I don't think anybody can. What is the economy going to do next? We just went through the biggest housing bubble in U.S. history. It's off the charts, and now it's starting to go up again. What to make of that? Are we going back into another bubble economy? I don't know, and I don't see how anybody knows that. You know, this reminds me, back in 2005, during our housing boom, I did a search of the Federal Reserve Board website on their research papers for bubble, housing bubble. And I found it was hard. This is our own Federal Reserve. It was hardly ever mentioned in their research papers. But I found one paper that mentioned that we might be in a housing bubble. So I called the economist up and I said, you're at the Federal Reserve Board. You had worries about a housing bubble. Why didn't you go for it and say strongly, we might be in a housing bubble? And he kind of hemmed and hawed and didn't seem to want to answer me. I had a sense that, and it's obvious, right? You're working as an economist at the Federal Reserve Board. You can't say that. I mean, because it would be attributed to your higher-ups. You're part of an organization. And the Fed chairman is so careful about everything. The Fed chairman is not going to say housing bubble. So you down below lower on the totem pole are sure not going to say it. So this is what the psychologist Irving Janis called groupthink, and he called it self-censorship. I don't think the Federal Reserve Board censored this economist, but he knows that he's part of an organization that's part of our country's animal spirits. It's part of it's managing the level of confidence. So he's just going to keep these doubts to himself.
But you didn't keep the doubts to yourself.
I think it's partly my personality. It's partly my different sense of national duty, or my duty to the Brazilians. I don't know. It's partly that I never accepted the conventional wisdom. It's maybe an attitude I got from my father. Don't believe all these important people when they tell you something's right. Well, there's certain kinds of things you can trust in them, but when it comes to politically involved discussions, it don't believe anything they say. And so that gave me the fortitude to